Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another great update for you from the brand RZE, formerly known as RZE, or German for traveling or voyage. They're a relatively new microbrand upstart, where basically the founder was a key designer for a very popular microbrand that has now kind of set out on his own to create a new vision from the ground up. The brand name is German, and that's because he was inspired by his own personal Zen U1 with its clean, simple lines and scratch resistance. So the translation also symbolizes moving forward. Now, in terms of the type of watch, this could actually meet two different criteria. So one being a dive watch, some key common characteristics in design, which you're looking for a diver, water resistance to typically through some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelets. It's also a traveler's watch, so you're going to pretty much want the GMT or world time functionality, so you're able to track multiple time zones with relative ease. This is their Ascentus GMT in white, and it's a prototype. And it's essentially a rugged four-hander with the ability to track multiple time zones at once. It features their new hex link bracelet, so that's a debut for this model. And of course, it is coated with RZE's Ultra Hex technology, which prevents scratches from regular wear. These are currently tracking for release by November of 2022, which will be soon, probably this month. By the time I'm posting this video, these are going to go for $549 direct, and I think they're packing quite a punch. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys. So this is a 40 millimeter diameter with an 11.2 millimeter height, 45.5 millimeters lug to lug. This is made out of grade 2 titanium, and of course it's all matte blasted with that ultra hex coating, which makes it up to 1200 hardness Vickers, which is very, very good. The crystal is a flat sapphire with AR coating. The bezel is more of a dive style bezel because it is 120 click unidirectional, not bidirectional. It does have the 24-hour indexing on it though, so you can still use it as such. It's just going to be not quite as intuitive as you would with a bidirectional bezel. The crown is screw down and signed very nicely. Nice size crown, really great to articulate. And then inside, although you can't see it, it's an automatic Seiko Instruments NH34 mechanical GMT movement, which we pretty much saw the Seiko kind of branded version, in this year's release of the new Seiko 5KX GMT. So with that said, we know that it's quite a reliable and robust movement. It is a collar style, so when it comes to the independent hand here, the one that you're going to be able to move without rehacking the movement is going to be the GMT hand, or 24-hour hand, versus if you were in a, if you had a versus this would be considered an office or a collar style GMT. And then there's also the flyer or travelers or true style GMT, which means you'd be able to jump the local hour hand. This completely still works though. They're just two different types, and honestly there are tons of watches that have this type of movement, particularly something like the SW300 or or actually the SW330 with the GMT hand, or the ETA 28, I think it's a 2892 or 2893. But essentially it's going to be, this collar style, and that's been something that's been out for a very long time. There's nothing wrong with it by any means. It's just slightly less intuitive when you're kind of actually hopping time zone to time zone, versus here, this is very intuitive if you're just, let's say, in an office space and you want to track multiple time zone. This actually works really, really great for that, and I'd say is very intuitive from that perspective. Now, the case back is solid titanium, and it's etched, and it does have a nice Viton gasket. So they do take this water resistance rating of 200 atmospheres. I'm sorry, 220 atmospheres or 200 meters very seriously. So this is definitely a watch you can trust around the water. We get into the dial. It's really, really nice matte white dial, applied indices, painted hands. There's no date here, which is a bit of a change, and it does make things a little bit simpler, so I do like that. And then it's using Swiss Superluminova, and you can see just by looking at it in the daylight that it's going to have some different tones along the way. And a big surprise for me on this one is that the dial itself is actually loomed, so really looking forward to sharing the low light transition and so on and so forth with you guys for that, because I think you'll be really appreciative of the Lume show that this thing puts on. It has 20 millimeter lugs, so although this is a really cool and new bracelet, if you did want to put it on a NATO or a two-piece strap or anything else, a leather, if you wanted to kind of dress it up, that totally is fine, and you could do that as well. It's of course all solid construction, drilled lugs, which make swapping anything out quite easy. You see that we do have screw in links here, so everything's solid. Also, you're getting this milled folding clasp, as well as these great, micro adjustment holes, so you can really dial in the fitment. And it's really nice, and it's actually quite smooth to the touch because of that finishing. So very, very cool. And it does flow quite nicely. I'm glad they used quite a slim buckle here. So this taper that kind of goes from 20 millimeters down to about 15.7 millimeters at the link, and then you get about 16 millimeters here at the buckle itself. So very nice. So with that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears extremely well. Of course, if I do bring it up very close to the camera, you're gonna get a lot of lens distortion. It's gonna seem a lot larger than it actually is. So what we'll do is we'll actually just tighten the shot up here so we can get a closer look at it on wrist without getting any of the distortion there. So you can see very nicely centered, and these contours and these angles actually do flow really well. And this does do a great job of hugging your wrist. So very comfortable, lays quite flat, very handsome. And I can appreciate that. Look at that profile. That is very, very nice. So I'm digging that, and you can see that this taper is really great that you get, so nice and thin on the underside, so that really promotes having nice articulation, not having a lot underneath on the underside of your wrist that's kind of causing any problems there in terms of mobility or restriction. So very, very cool. Again, there's that nice flat profile. Something that you won't get if you were to buy this movement inside of that Seiko 5. Definitely feels a lot taller by comparison to this, which, it's not just the ultimate spec, because at 11.2 millimeters, it is much thinner. But even just the way that they crafted the visual weight with the mid case and the angles, and then that blacked out 24-hour bezel, it all kind of comes together to just make this a really nice looking, well wearing piece. So with that said, let's go ahead, get this off the wrist, and set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay guys, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Ho ho ho! As you can see, beautifully loomed. So if you are a Lume junkie, and you also want to have a GMT complication, this could definitely be a big contender for you. I love that the Loom is so bright that you can actually really see the legibility even down to the dial text. So that is very, very nice. I love how bright and bold even the 24-hour scale is. So if you want to track time in the dark, you're even, you have that capability as well. But, you're not always going to be out in kind of a pitch black situation, or you're not always going to be out in a perfectly lit situation, which is kind of what my studio lights do a really good job of kind of recreating. So with that said, it's nice to kind of see how this watch renders in less than optimal lighting, because, you're typically going to be coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, hanging out underneath the shade of a tree, or just inside of your favorite automobile. So it's really good to know what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And you can see, although this is a matte finish, those angles and then also that hard coating do still give you a nice little bit of color play there. Not to the level of if it was brushed, and of course all the light play you're going to get, but you can see that it's not like it's completely flat. There's a certain sheen that you're still going to get, and there's a brightness that you're getting off of this titanium, which isn't the norm. A lot of the times matte blasted titanium can be much darker. So the fact that they were able to still have this brighter hue that is a bit more versatile and definitely looks a bit more like steel is great. I can definitely appreciate that. And you can see that even as the light transitions indirectly on and off of that dial, that it still remains very, very legible. I dig that. So I mean, this thing is just up to the challenge. Even with some harsh lighting here, you can see still quite legible. That is just awesome. So I dig that a whole lot. All right, guys, closing thoughts on the wrist. Really perfect Goldilocks sizing, super lightweight without feeling insubstantial or cheap. In terms of model variants, definitely check the site for current availability. And then in terms of comparable models, this definitely has kind of a Zen or Damasco remix type of vibe, but it's totally in a good way. It definitely does still have some of that magic. I think that he wanted to recreate, paying homage to some of these German brands, but it definitely has its own design language, especially when you get into just how the uniqueness of the dial, the loom layout, even down to the bracelet choices. So the link choices on the bracelet. So I think it's in a totally good way. And if you told me this was a German watch, I probably wouldn't be surprised if I didn't know the brand. And I think him capturing that aesthetic, I really don't have a problem with it because it's a good look. And then when we get into, I guess, just the bottom line on this one, affordable GMTs are definitely all the rage right now, but it's for good reason. It's a complication that is kind of perfectly timed for the rush to get folks, to support the rush of folks that are, in a hurry to be traveling and exploring again. And this totally hits that. So if you do like RZE watches and you want to take them with you, this is definitely a piece that has the look, has actually the spec as well, right? Because you are getting nice shock resistance on that Seiko movement. You're also getting great scratch resistance. This is a watch that only, not only can give you multiple time zones to track while you're traveling, it's also going to be robust and tough enough as well to take on your trip, as well as it being, a little bit more under the radar in terms of, if there's anybody that's targeting, social influencers or anybody like that, and you're worried about somebody following your Instagram and trying to rob you. The good news is they're probably not going to know what RZE is, and they're not going to want to risk anything to steal your RZE. So maybe you do already have an Explorer 2 or a GMT Master 2 or something like that. but you need something that you can actually go and enjoy without looking over your shoulder. So I don't know, there's a lot of reasons to like this piece. I love the colorways, I love the design, and it just feels really good in person. I like that it's light but doesn't feel flimsy. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.